Welcome to Eat, Sleep, Wine, Repeat, a podcast for all you wine lovers who, if you're like me, just cannot get enough of the good stuff. I'm Janina, your host, brand ambassador, wine educator, and sommelier. So stick with me as we dive deeper into this ever-evolving, wonderful world of wine. And wherever you are listening to this, cheers to you. Hello, wine friends, and welcome back to another episode where today we are getting to know better one of Italy's most age-worthy and prestigious red wines, Brunello di Montalcino. Made from 100% Sangiovese, we are going to be exploring this grape variety and its clones. What does it actually taste like, and why, if Brunello and Chianti are made from the same variety, why do they taste so different? We'll be discussing the Montalcino area, of course, the beauty of this place, but also winemaking styles and aging of Brunello. By the end of this episode, you'll understand what makes Brunello distinct from other Sangiovese wines, how Terroir in Montalcino shapes the style, and feel more confident in what you are getting when choosing a bottle. And if you've ever dreamed about learning wine in the place it's actually made, you're also going to hear about an awesome opportunity to study Brunello in the vineyards and cellars of the region itself, alongside many other Italian grapes. My guest today, back by popular demand, you told me how much you loved him on episode 248, talking about the Nebbiolo grape. Well, I had to get him back. I am chatting again with Ian D'Agata, one of the world's leading authorities on Italian wine and the founder of the Ian D'Agata Wine Academy. Make sure you stay to the end of the episode as he has his upcoming wine course in Montalcino this April, and you are invited. So let's head to the hills of Montalcino and explore one of Italy's most iconic wines. Okay, Ian, you are back. You are back by public demand in the wine chair because we loved the last episode and you are fantastic at teaching. But it was really interesting. After we recorded, you were talking about just actually how much you really enjoy teaching and how wine education you think is actually just so important, not just for professionals, but everyday wine lovers. So, talk to me about why you think wine education and how it's expressed is so important.
It's always been part of my shtick in the sense that I'm a wine writer.
Shtick? Is that even a word? Shtick. Yeah. It is now.
People know me as a wine writer, but actually they also know me as a wine educator in that I've been teaching courses for almost 30 years now, even longer actually, because I was already doing some courses in my 20s in Rome, not in an organized way. So I have a background in medicine. I'm a pediatric gastroenterologist and liver transplant doc. Haven't been
good to know, just in case. It's always good to have one of them around.
I haven't been in an operating room for a long time, but I was a university affiliated for a very long time and had medical students, and I love teaching. And part of that comes from the fact that I had very good mentors. Everything I am today is the result of having had good teachers. And I really understood at an early age how important it is to have a good teacher, because I'll just give you an example. In high school, when I was in high school, one of my best, I did my high school in Toronto, in Canada, and one of my best courses was English. I really did very well in English language and English literature classes. And the scoring system there was out of 100. And I was regularly in 90, 92, 94% territory. Then one year we got a new teacher, and I frankly did not like her. I don't know why. Maybe I was an immature, 15 or 16-year-old, but I just didn't like her. And or maybe we just didn't understand each other. And of course, I thought she was lousy, so I blamed her, but who knows? To make a long story short, my scores tanked and I started getting 60s. So the first two, it was divided in trimesters or year. And the first two trimesters, I got 260s, and I'd never seen those in my life, and neither had my family. Then for whatever reason, the teacher left the school. I have no idea if she was fired or if she had to leave because of personal reasons, or maybe got a better job. I don't know. But the minute she left in the third trimester, I went right back up to not the 90 I usually got, but 84 or 85. So that really struck with me because I didn't feel like I'd done anything different. Yet so I understood that having a good teacher is very important, and I want to be a good teacher to other people. I've had good teachers, and that's really where my love for education comes from.
Well, I thoroughly enjoyed our last episode where you were teaching us all about Nebbiolo, Barolo, Barbaresco. So we are going to talk a little bit about another Italian wine region. Everybody, I'm not telling you what it is yet, actually. They already know. They've already seen the title. But before we get to that, you've often said that people tend to buy wines they recognize or they understand. So if more people were educated about Italian wine, which Italian grape variety do you think that they would reach for more often?
You know what? Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I think it's very true. I think, there's a reason why brands are so important. Everybody wants to get a Burberry trench. Everybody wants to get, an Adidas or a Nike sneaker, Hermes and Valentino, Mercedes. These brands all sell well because they convey a message of quality, of talent, and people are comfortable in buying that. And this is very true when it comes to Cabernet Sauvignon and Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. The whole world knows about those grapes and everybody feels very comfortable. And when you have maybe, the mother or the family matriarch in a Tesco or in a store, and she has to buy a bottle of wine, she doesn't have that much time to pick a bottle because she's probably got 8-year-old Herbie on a search and destroy mission of the store.
Oh,
And so
Herbie.
she's got to make up her mind quickly. And if she sees Chardonnay, she's comfortable with that. But if she sees Pampanuto or Nasco or even Durif, that isn't going to go very far. So yes, I believe that we need to talk to people about grape varieties, explain to them what each grape variety, when it's transformed into wine, will taste of. And that way people, once they have those ABCs down, they can make a choice. Because wine really, when there's many trappings to wine that will influence the final taste, but there is no doubt that first and foremost, the single most important thing is the grape variety used to make that wine. Because you could use all the oak you want and blah, blah, blah. But the point is, Cabernet Sauvignon will always give you a wine that tastes different from Merlot and Cabernet Franc. So you buy the wine because you like what Merlot has to offer. You buy Pinot Noir because you like its fruitiness and absence of tannins. So we have to be able to do the same thing for Italian grapes and wines. We have to get people to be comfortable with those. So, for example, if you like red wines that are light and easy and juicy and fruity, that you can maybe even chill, a wine made with a grape called Schiava from Alto Adige is lovely. It's delicious. It's like a cross between Beaujolais and Pinot Noir. It's really beautiful. Or Grignolino, which is a Piedmont variety, which is very pale colored. So the wine actually looks like it's a rosé, but it is in fact a red wine. And it has a little bit of a tannic bite, but it's so light and lively. And it's all about perfume, rose hips and sour red berries. And so if you like that, then you know that you can reach for Grignolino and you know you can reach for Schiava. But if you don't know that, then you're always going to go to Beaujolais. And this works both ways, not just with the public at large and the wine lovers, but also with those who has to sell wine. Because if those who sell wine aren't acquainted with these rarer, lesser known Italian grapes, when somebody walks into that store or a restaurant and says, "Hi there, I'd just like a light red wine for tonight. I've had a miserable day. I just want to relax, nothing too oaky, what do you recommend?" If that person isn't well versed on Italian grapes and wines, he or she is going to say, "Oh, here's a Beaujolais 99% of the time and nothing else." So what I'm trying to do is, and I love a good Beaujolais, so don't get me wrong, but I'm just trying to get people to expand the pickings.
Okay, right. You've done the light reds, but come on now, if I want a heavy red and I am in Italy, and we're not talking about Barolo, we're not talking about Brunello, which we're getting to, what is the grape variety that we might go for if we knew more about it?
I imagine most people know about Amarone now, right? Which is a red wine made with raisin grapes, what gives you
Yeah.
what it's
You're not
let's
allowed that one. No. No.
no, okay. Well, fair enough. Then I think a very good example would be a wine made with the Nero d'Avola grape from Sicily, or
Hmm.
maybe a Canona, which is basically Grenache, or a Carignan, literally called Carignano from Sardinia, or maybe even an Aglianico wine from Campania and or Basilicata. Those are big, burly, sturdy reds, great with stews and steaks. People will love them.
Yeah, no, actually, Aglianico is a great shout. And I always say that's like the Barolo of the
It
South.
sure is.
That needs its own episode because everybody, that's actually they're serious, serious wines. They're not even lesser known wines. They really are. They're worth a full episode. Okay, right. But let's bring it back to this episode. So you, first of all, you're putting this philosophy into practice. You have the Ian Daggerter Wine Academy, and there's a
Yeah.
course coming up soon in Montalcino. Tell us just a little bit. Give us a sneak peek about this program, and then I need to pick your brain about Brunello di Montalcino.
I've been teaching for 30 years. I started really officially back in 2001 when I was still writing for the Gambero Rosso in Italy. They had a school called Città del Gusto, and I was one of their first teachers there. Then I was called by the Hassler Hotel in Rome that created the first ever wine academy in Italy. It was called the International Wine Academy of Roma, and Hugh Johnson was the honorary president, and Steve Spurrier was the president. And I was a young guy, and I had the huge good fortune of being called to be one of the directors there. So I just got to learn so much, and that really cemented my love for the educational aspect of wine. And from then on, I just created so many different schools for so many different institutions, or even devised courses. I did it for Italian universities. I did it for private institutions. And it just got to the point that we were doing a huge festival in Barolo every year called Collisioni, where we had a school. But unfortunately, with COVID, we had to put that on hold. And now, finally, the pandemic ended. After a few years of getting set up again, I was able to launch the Indagata Wine Academy because a lot of sommeliers and importers and just wine lovers, they were asking me, starting in about 22, 23, when the world was getting back on its feet, they were asking me, Ian, do it. And so we finally did. And so we created the Wine Academy, and we do courses really all over the world. But we started by doing them in Shanghai, where I live, and of course in Montalcino, as you say, where we have a collaboration with the Castiglion del Bosco winery, and they're kind enough to let us use one of their beautiful classrooms, let's say, at the resort. And so we do that twice a year. We do it once in April and once in November. And it's a course, an advanced course on Italian wines. It's 2.5 days, and it allows people to, not a big class, we limit it at 12 people. And we just want like-minded people with similar passions to get together. They can network, they can make new friends. They will certainly learn a lot about Italian wines because on average we open up anywhere from 80 to 100 wines. We have winemaker dinners in the evening for the 2 evenings. We go see a couple of wineries, and it's just a great way to learn about wine, and it's a lot of fun, which wine should be.
100%. Now, I've seen that program, but we're going to talk about that afterwards. I need us to set the scene. So, for anyone who hasn't been to Montalcino in Tuscany, I mean, where is it? Talk about the beauty.
Well, Montalcino really is pretty, and everybody
It
who's
is.
seen photos of Tuscany knows how beautiful. It's a panorama of cypresses and rolling hills and gold fields of wheat and corn and vineyards and olive trees everywhere. So Tuscany is a remarkably beautiful place, and Montalcino is a small little hilltop town, very close to Siena, the famous city of the Palio, the horse race. So Siena itself is only like about an hour and a half, not even from Florence. And so it's in the southeastern part of Tuscany. It's a more open, sunny, rolling, gently hilled area. And it's got castles, it's got farms, great restaurants. It's just a remarkably, it's really postcard pretty. So it's a beautiful place to do anything, not just a wine school.
I totally agree. I've stayed in Montalcino, the hilltop town. My God, first of all, you see 90-year-olds walking up the steepest roads. Everything. And by the way, everybody, you be prepared. Like you're going to you're going to be squatting. You're going to have some fantastic glutes by the end of this, right? But I remember being in, I think it was even the bathroom of my hotel room, this humongous window, and looking out on, as you said, the most stunning rolling hills and seeing the vineyards like below me. But it's really different, isn't it, to Chianti? Because Chianti is almost like you're ducking and you're weaving and you're turning and curving around all of these hill, going around corners constantly. Whereas there's this expanse with the vineyards of Montalcino, isn't there?
No, you're totally right. Chianti is basically about ripping small vineyard land from forests, because many of the vineyards are like little patches amongst trees, and there's a lot of shadow, and it's much cooler and fresher. Montalcino instead is much more open and sunny, and that is why the Sangiovese expresses itself different in these two places and gives two very different wines, both world-class wines when they're well made, but really very different, Chianti Classico and Brunello di Montalcino.
Okay, well, now you've mentioned Sangiovese and you've talked about how you get very different styles. But I mean, I hate to even ask this question, but I want some sort of answer, which is, how does Sangiovese in Montalcino, aka Brunello, compare to, as an example, by the coast? You have Morellino di Scansano. You obviously have Chianti, which is more northern. And then to the east, you've got Vino Nobile di Montepulciano. They're all Sangiovese wines. Are there any key indicators for maybe picking up one in a blind tasting? Or is it just way too nuanced?
The certainly the climate will have a big effect. Morellino di Scansano is by the coast. It's a much warmer area than even Brunello land or certainly Chianti Classico. So those wines tend to be a little riper fruit, softer acidity, and so they're fairly recognizable compared to the nervous tension of Chianti Classico, which, especially when they're made in towns like Radda, which is high up, tend to be marked by high acidity and the very crunchy, crisp red fruit, as opposed to a decadent, almost jammy one. But the main difference is in the grape blend of the wines, because Brunello Montalcino is the only one that by law has to be 100% Sangiovese. Chianti Classico can be, but in fact, as little as 80% can be Sangiovese and 20% can be something else. And it makes a huge difference if to the Sangiovese you're adding Cabernet Sauvignon or Pinot Noir or Merlot or a local variety called Canaiolo Nero. It becomes a totally different wine. So even within Chianti Classico, the wines are very, very different. And, you can talk about Chianti Classico all you want, but if in one you have 20% Cabernet Sauvignon and in another one you have 20% Canaiolo Nero, those are just two very different wines, and it has very little to do with the soil or anything else. And same thing in the Morellino di Scansano area. And what makes it even more different there is that in that area, they tend to use different complementary grapes. For example, they use one called Alicante Boucher, and that tends to give you a very bubblegummy, very floral note that is unlike any wine in Chianti Classico or Montalcino. So they really do have different aroma and flavor profiles.
What about Vino Nobile di Montepulciano, though?
No, Vino Nobile di Montepulciano. Yeah, it's a good question. Nobile di Montepulciano, the whole area of Montepulciano is the one part of Tuscany that really has been systematically associated with international grape varieties, Carmignano too, with international grape varieties for a long, long time. So, for many, many years, Nobile di Montepulciano could have as much as 30% of the international varieties. So Sangiovese is a delicate variety, and it is easily overpowered by a more, let's say, beefcake or bodybuilder type grape. So when you add even 10% of Merlot or Cabernet Sauvignon to Sangiovese, you can really tell it's a different wine. And if you're adding 30, it's completely different. A very famous wine man called Giuseppe Mazzocolin, who for many, many years was in charge at Felsina, one of the best Chianti Classico estates of them all. He used to say that, to change the makeup of a Sangiovese wine, all you need to do is add even 1% of Cabernet Sauvignon. Maybe that was an exaggeration. But I've done many of these taste tests with graduated cylinders. And granted, this is my life and my living, and I've been doing it for 30 years. But I never, never, never make a mistake if there's 10% of something added. That has yet to happen to me. So after lower than 10%, it can get tricky. But it just really changes the makeup. And it's not that one wine is better or worse than the other. They're just different. And it really depends what you like.
Well, okay. So actually, yeah, this is a really valid point. Brunello di Montalcino is the only 100% Sangiovese as standard, unless it's a winemaker's choice. So let's talk about Brunello. First of all, why is it called Brunello? I mean, do we start talking about clones now? Or is there a reason for the name?
Yeah, because originally the grape that was used by the Biondi Santi family to come up with Brunello di Montalcino was this grape which has a brownish hue and therefore was called the little brown grape or Brunello, and that's where the name comes from.
Okay, right. So how is now in Montalcino, presumably though, Brunello, which is a kind of a different type of Sangiovese, has got to be lots of different Brunello clones because grapes adapt and mutate throughout the years. So talk to me about the clonal diversity in Brunello.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Sangiovese is one of the, older grape varieties that we have, although it really wasn't documented officially until just 3 or 4 centuries ago. It's been around for a while. And the main thing is that in Brunello land, when they selected the Sangiovese to first make Brunello, which is actually a recent creation by fine wine standards, for the longest time, Montalcino was most famous for its white wine made with Moscato Bianco or white Muscat. And Brunello really becomes important really only in the 20th century. In 1933, at the Siena exhibition, imagine that there were only 4 Brunellos bottled and presented as such. Today, there's over 250 producers. But in 1933, which really wasn't that long ago, it was only 4. And of those 4, one wine wasn't even being bottled regularly every year. So when they first started, they chose this Sangiovese growing locally, which was characterized by rather big berries and what they called Sangiovese Grosso. In fact, it is my opinion that a lot of that Sangiovese Grosso was getting confused with another local variety called Cilieggiolo. But anyways, the Sangiovese Grosso became the identity of Montalcino. The other parts of Italy had a smaller berried Sangiovese called Sangiovese Piccolo. So it just became accepted that Montalcino was characterized by the Sangiovese Grosso. But in fact, that is a very big simplification because, as you alluded to, Sangiovese has many, many different types of varieties, sub-varieties in its family, what we would call biotypes, grapes that have grown at 500 meters, at 50 meters by the seashore, and so on and so forth. So then the nurseries, of course, start to select grapes that behave well and that produce well, and then they propagate these and they create clonal lines, they create clones. So the fact is, there's over 100 different clones of Sangiovese. If you want to plant Sangiovese, you can plant as many as you want. And there's Sangiovese that comes from Emilia-Romagna. There's Sangiovese that comes from Tuscany. There's Sangiovese that comes from other parts of Italy. And so you can really mix and match, trying to get the best possible blend for the best possible wine. So the distinction between, and I finish here, the distinction between Sangiovese Piccolo and Sangiovese Grosso is an old one. It doesn't really hold water anymore. In fact, many Brunellos today are made with very small berried Sangiovese plants, which usually are considered to be better than the big berried ones anyways. So that's where we are.
Well, actually, it's only in the last few decades, isn't it, that Tuscany in general has actually really started identifying what is the good Sangiovese and bad, right? Am I right? And tell me if it's others have done it as well. But Banfi were one of the producers that put a lot of effort into identifying which clones, which biotypes, which Sangiovese to actually focus on for quality.
True, it's true. And Banfi and other wineries, they really needed to do that because Sangiovese is potentially a difficult grape variety. It's a grape variety that gives a lot of tannin, a lot of acidity, and unless you get a decent grapevine to work with, it's hard to make great wine. So everybody was interested in developing better material with which to make wine. So Banfi, Biondisanti, Coldorcia, these are all wineries that worked very strongly on identifying the best Sangiovese plants amongst their vineyards, so much so that they were able to copyright and trademark the Sangioveses they developed. So, for example, there is a Sangiovese BBS clone, which is Biondisanti, that's available, and you can plant a Biondisanti clone if you want. And there is a Coldorcia clone as well. And then, of course, the Italian government correctly got into the act too. And with the Chianti Classico 2000 project, they developed many new clones, the so-called CHCL clones, 2000, 2001, and blah, blah, blah. But, there's many different varieties of Sangiovese. There's one called T19 that is actually originally from Emilia-Romagna, and it's a little virused, so that's a problem, but it gives a great wine. So there's many, many different Sangioveses, and most people, when they have to plant a vineyard, unless they do a massal selection of an old vineyard they have, which they know gives really great wines, they will plant a mixture of clones to try to make the most complex wine possible.
I have to stop you now and ask you about this T19 that you're saying is a little bit virused but tastes really good. What does that mean? Does that mean that once you're planting it in the ground, there's a virus that can kind of spread, or that it just behaves badly or not quite evenly? What does it mean by being a little bit virused?
Well, it's probably, I'm not sure I use the right, because it's like saying you're a little bit sick. Yeah, you're just sick, right? So, but I guess there's degrees of everything. No, yeah, sure. If a plant is virus, it grows less well, less strong. But at the same time, the virus usually causes the vine to be stressed enough to make a better quality fruit. And the problem is, you're absolutely right. You really can't go planting this stuff, because then you spread the virus. Then, people might plant it anyways because it gives you a very good quality wine. But in theory, you don't want to go planting virus grapevines because you don't want to spread the disease. So, but there's lots of examples of virus grapevines giving a very good wine. In Piedmont, one of the Nebbiolos that was really all the rage in the 1980s, Nebbiolo Miquette, that is a leaf roll virus affected Nebbiolo Lampia. And because it is affected by the virus, it gives you much smaller bunches, much smaller berries, much thicker skins, and the wine just ends up being more concentrated. Is it really better? I'm not sure, because I think some of those wines are monolithic, but they are more concentrated. And back in the 80s, when everybody still had very high yields and were cropping too high, to use a grape that gave you less and more concentrated was actually a good thing. Today, with climate change, you probably don't want that. So you see, life changes, and so does wine.
It's fascinating. Okay, we are talking about these clones, these slightly virusy versions of Sangiovese. But Sangiovese as a whole, if someone was like, okay, this sounds interesting, I've never tasted Sangiovese, how would you personally describe Sangiovese, the family of Sangiovese grapes?
I think the main thing with Sangiovese, when it's a good Sangiovese wine, it will always remind you of red berries, more so than dark berries or black fruit. So it's sour red cherry, pomegranate, cranberry, red currant. It really is a red berried. It will always remind you of black tea, green tea, but black tea mostly. Licorice, there's always a licorice. And there's a very pretty violet note to Sangiovese. In fact, the name of Sangiovese often is related to the violet flower. So violet for sure. As the wine ages, then it will remind you of tobacco and old leather and forest floor. A Sangiovese wine usually does not remind you of cocoa and coffee. Those are usually derived from the oak that you use to age the wine in. But usually, a good Sangiovese wine has the descriptors I told you. A little bit of blood orange too, especially that's very typical of Montalcino, where it's warmer and sunnier, and high acidity, noteworthy tannin, mouth coating wine. But when it's well made, it's luscious and balanced and beautiful.
See, now interesting, because I often get, when you walk into like a meat store and there's like there's certain dried meats hanging,
Yep.
and there might be like loads of sage and loads of
Yeah,
herbs.
yeah.
I do often get that character as well with Sangioveses.
Totally right. I forgot to mention that. Absolutely. The herbal notes like
okay.
sage and rosemary, thyme. And also I will add another one that I forgot, flint. Sangiovese, especially when it comes from a colder area and higher up, can be very flinty. Not the graphite of Cabernet Sauvignon, but it can be flinty. Absolutely.
But what I love about Sangiovese, and like just what you've described with things like red currants, with blood orange, whatever, when you're talking about these red fruits, the fruitiness, it's a more sour or more tart or more wild red fruited wine rather than being that kind of really sweet, luscious, ripe red fruits. You don't get that. And I love that with Sangiovese.
Yeah, no, it's about as different from Zinfandel or something like that, or like some New World Syrah wines. And again, it's not that one is better than the other. They're just radically different, and therefore you like Monet, I like Picasso, you like yellow, I like red, and that sort of thing.
Well, let's come back to Brunello as a wine. So we already know that it's slightly different from all the other Sangiovese wines because it is 100% Sangiovese, but also Brunello it's famous for its aging potential, and it has specific aging rules. So can you touch on, in terms of before it's released, what does Brunello have to go through?
No, I think that the key thing to know about Brunello, I always, exactly when we talk about education and teaching, I always tend to tell people, don't worry so much about, all the nuances, because probably you'll forget them. So you can always read those up. But the important thing is that you know the nitty gritty, the things that are going to be very practical for you. And the thing is that Brunello is a wine that has to be aged a certain number of years before it is released. So it used to be one of the oldest wines when it came out on the market, because it had to be aged like 3 years in oak. And that turned out to be maybe too much. And a lot of the wines were reaching the market already tired. And so nowadays, most Brunello di Montalcinos are aged about 2 years in oak and another year in bottle before they come out. So the wine is actually certainly older when it comes to the market compared to other Italian wines, but it's still fresh and lively and vibrant. And you're absolutely right, because Sangiovese has this capacity to age well once it's turned into wine. Brunello di Montalcino will easily last 20 years. It does that really very easily. Even entry-level wines will last 20 years, but the really good ones will last 40 and 50 years. And Italy's oldest known wines that still exist are Biondi Santi's 1881 and 1898. So that's just incredible.
1891. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming the fact that you've mentioned that, you've tasted it.
No, actually, I haven't. I haven't never. No, I wish I was invited to a tasting where they were opening it a long time ago, but I wasn't able to go. I've had very old. I've had back to the 20s and 30s, but no, not that old. I wish. I've had Bordeaux that old. But not that one.
There is still time. There is still time.
Okay, I'm hoping. If anybody wants to open one for me, let me know. I'll be over.
Well, your course is being held at Castiglion del Bosco. How far did they go back? Because they're quite a historic estate of the region, aren't they?
They are. But the important thing about Castiglion del Bosco is that it's really risen to really important heights. I'd say in the last, now they've been making wine for a long time, but really I'd say what's exciting about this estate is how far they've come in a relatively short time, because really in the last 10 years, I think the wines have become exceptional to the point that I don't think people are yet aware of how better they've become. The 2021s from Castiglion del Bosco may very well be the best wines they've ever made, and really noteworthy wines. Already the classic. Then they make a cru called Sangue del Drago, Campo del Drago, and Campo del Drago. And it's the estate that, more power to them, has really invested in Rosso di Montalcino, and they've done a lot of studies, and they're the only wine estate in Montalcino that makes 3 different Rosso di Montalcinos, because they've really mapped out their area, and they're all single vineyard wines. And that sort of research always pays off in the long run, and not just the Rossos improve, but the Brunellos too. So kudos to them.
Now, that's interesting. Of course, I've completely forgotten about Rosso di Montalcino. This is a great wine because Brunello di Montalcino tends to often be quite expensive. So talk to us a little bit about, this is a great way to try some Sangiovese from the area and without the same price point.
No, I think, and that's it's really a success story that I think all of Montalcino can and should be proud of. Logically enough, for the longest time, the focus was on Brunello, which is one of Italy's 2 or 3 most famous wines. Some people will say the most famous, but very famous wine. And the whole goal was to talk about Brunello and improve Brunello and establish it as a age-worthy, collectible wine that was, as good as the best from Bordeaux and Burgundy and blah, blah, blah. But in the process, everybody was forgetting about Rosso, and which many times was made as a declassified Brunello. So there really wasn't a Rosso identity in many cases. But all that has changed. I'd say really in the last 5 to 10 years, there has been much more focus on Rosso as a more approachable, cost-effective, food-friendly wine that is ready to drink young. And even the consorzio and the producers are now doing specific shows related to Rosso di Montalcino, and they're putting the focus just on Rosso alone. And I think that's great, because you're absolutely right. Sometimes it's hard to afford a bottle of Brunello in a restaurant. That's just the way it is. There's not much made, and it's going to carry a price, supply and demand. But Rosso is more available. It's fresh, it's juicy, very nicely vibrant and acidic. So it's going to be food friendly. There are some Rossos that are much bigger. They're almost like baby Brunellos. And those are nice and rich and creamy. So there's a bit of everything in the Rosso category. Depends what you like. But it's a really good category today of Italian wines that is fairly priced and delivers a lot of bang for your buck and a lot of very good wines.
Does the Rosso di Montalcino have to spend a certain amount of time in oak, or have they actually?
No, it doesn't. It actually can be just stainless steel only. And that's why sometimes you have some really crisp, juicy, fresh numbers. And then you have some made from grapes that could be used to be made Brunello, but maybe the wines are too young. The producer doesn't want to make a Brunello with them. So then you get a much richer, creamier Brunello. It's actually a bit more complicated than that, because Sangiovese is very site sensitive, much like Pinot Noir and Riesling and Nebbiolo. So if you grow the Sangiovese grapes on a very stony soil, gravelly soil, the wine is very flinty and mineral and really not much flesh to it, a little almost steely in nature. And that's a very different Rosso. Usually those are vineyards that are not allowed to make Brunello. And then you have Rossos made from vineyards that are allowed to make Brunello. And although this is a generalization, I understand, but the Rossos made from the vineyards that can make Brunello are usually richer and creamier and fleshier. And they really are, I almost would dare to say, 2 different wines, even though they both carry the Rosso di Montalcino name. But again, it's different strokes for different folks. Some people will like one and some people will like the other. The main thing is Rosso di Montalcino is really a good buy now. The wines have a very high quality level, and it's really a good category of wine for people who don't want to break the bank but want to drink well. Rosso is a good wine to choose.
See, Now, I just want to go over to potential where the vines are planted, because you talked about how stonier soils are going to give you that kind of more linear style of Rosso. But what are the main soils for where Brunello is planted? Because quite clearly, it gives you more mouthfeel. So people probably listening are going, Janina, why haven't you asked about the soils? Can you satisfy my soil geeks for a moment, please?
Sure, sure. Well, the main simplistic thing to say is that Sangiovese likes a soil that, though it has clay, cannot really be clay dominated. That is a soil that is more ideal for Merlot, for example. With Sangiovese, the best soils, the very famous galestro, which is a schisty shale soil, stony, gravelly, with a little bit of clay, of course. Alberese, which is a more white-colored soil that gives you sort of saltier mouth feels. And then there's a loamier soil called macigno. And these soils are all present in different proportions in different parts of Chianti Classico, Chianti Rufina, and of course Montalcino. And depending on where you have more of one or the other, you will get a different makeup to your wine. But in general, a slightly stony soil is very good for Montalcino. Shale, schist, that's really what you want. And for for Sangiovese.
Interesting. Okay, thank you for clearing that up, because I realised, I didn't touch on that. But let's come back to Castiglion del Bosco, because actually I'm quite excited. This is actually a brand new winery for me, so I'm definitely going to look up their Rossos. So thank you for that. But they've got cellars that I think, is that where you're doing the course, down in their cellar?
No, we have a dinner there. They have a private member cellar, and it's really beautiful. Honestly, it's a gorgeous winery, and we're very lucky to have this collaboration. And could have really had it with any other winery in Montalcino because they all work well. And I love to go, for example, to Coldorcia, where we do a special focus on Moscadello di Montalcino for the students. But
whoa, Moscadello.
Moscadello is the white wine, the sweet white wine of Montalcino. Yeah.
But I didn't realize that was still really a thing. Oh my God. Am I supposed to know? It's still a thing.
There's only about 11 producers still making it, but they make it very well and it's beautiful. And the whole idea is to convey the different wines made in Montalcino. So we try to expose people to as many different types of wine. But the main thing, Castiglion del Bosco, like I say, they have this remarkably beautiful resort. We sleep in a hotel near the resort, and every morning we shuttle from the hotel to the winery. And there we have a beautiful classroom actually it's a second floor with lots of light. And we have our PowerPoint presentations. We will have lunch with the Castiglion del Bosco winery staff in their staff cafeteria. So that's always interesting. And in the evening, then we have real dinners and more tastings, usually focused ones with a select group of wineries from Montalcino. At another general dinner, usually with wines from all over Italy, we just invite as many different Brunello producers who want to come, because it's open to everybody, and just meant to spend a nice evening in the company of people who love wine, who make wine, and it's just a lot of fun.
I love that. Some of my best wine moments are when I sit at the dinner table, surrounded not just by just the one winemaker talking about his wines, but when you get so many winemakers and the cross conversations you have, the discussions that they start having between themselves, and the unbelievable information that you can extract that you just would never be able to get just from one winemaker, because they don't even think to tell you that information, because for them it's kind of obvious, it's part of their day, but not for us. So I've absolutely loved those dinners.
And they're also, and they're friends, most of them, right? So there's always maybe a healthy spirit of competition, but no, they're friends and they get along, and so it's just a very nice moment. And wine producers are always happy to meet wine lovers. They don't have to be wine professionals. Of course, they're happy to meet the wine professionals too. So it just makes for a very nice ambience. And it's at the end of the day, and you're all relaxed. And Tuscan food is is so hearty and fun.
Mm.
It's just a nice moment.
Totally. And obviously, we talk about Tuscan food, but getting back to the wines just for a second, the people on this course are going to taste anything from 80 to 100 wines, but we're not talking about just Tuscan wines. The
No.
Central Italy, South Italy, right? What kind of wines will students taste during the course? And feel free to drop in a great producer or two.
Yeah, no, I mean, the idea is to give a panorama of Italian wines. So we have 4 modules over the 2 days: the wines of the Northeast and wines of the Northwest, Central Italy, and then Southern Italy and the islands. And so everything from Barolo to Brunello to Amarone, the classics, but also white wines like Gewürztraminer and Pinot Bianco and all the Malvasias, the Trebbianos, Carricante from Sicily. And yeah, I try very much, the wines. And this is something I always forget to say, but it's very important. The wines I use in my school are not sponsored. The wineries do not pay me or our school to show their wines. And that is a very important difference with respect to many others. And we choose the wines just because we feel that they are benchmark wines for that grape variety or that territory. We may be right, we may be wrong. You may like them, you may not like them, but at least we give you what we feel as a benchmark. So, the Carricante or the Etna Bianco wine of Benanti, it was the first winery to put Etna on the map, both white and red. So that's a benchmark right there. The Barolos are so many great producers, but, everybody from Vaira to the Molinos to the Conternos, Amarones, Tedeschi, Masi, Tomasi. We try to bring as many as we can. Now, clearly, there has to be a limit. So maybe in one course we'll have an Amarone from Masi, and another one we will have an Amarone from Tedeschi. We usually have more than one Amarone and more than one Barolo. Like I say, lots of wines for people to try. Italy makes a lot of different wines, a lot of different grapes. So this is why our advanced course is divided actually in two parts, because it's just impossible to give you a real complete picture. So maybe in one course we'll have a few more Brunellos and a few less Barolos. In the other one we'll have a few more Barolos and a few less Brunellos. But we really try to give you a panorama. Those Aglianicos we mentioned earlier, Fiano and Greco, all the Lambruscos, which, sometimes people have a mistaken idea of Lambrusco as just Prosecco, cheap and cheerful. So we really try to make an effort and give high quality wines that are really representative of the grape and the variety. And of course, it's not just the wines in this course that do that. There would be many others we could choose, and we try to rotate them. But at least it's a good start.
Ugh, honestly, you've just mentioned so many different varieties, and I'm just like, that is the joy of Italian wine. So, okay, who is the course designed for? Because we have so many different people listening. Can everybody, if they are a wine enthusiast or a wine professional and they just want to learn more about these wines and taste with you and learn from you, can they come on this course?
Absolutely. I always devise my courses so they're user friendly for people who aren't just in the trade or geeks, because I think both branches are important. I think we need the wine professionals to know more about Italian wine, as we mentioned earlier. So, of course, we want young somms, older somms, agents, distributors, importers, educators, and bloggers, because, like I say, they have a very important role in conveying what Grignolino is about, or what Verduno Pela Verga is about, or the Nascetta di Novello, and those are all Piedmont grapes. But then there's so many more, like Ansonica, from the Tuscan coast, on Vermentino from the Tuscan coast. Very important. I mean, everybody might know Vermentino, but if you don't know what Ansonica is and what kind of wine Ansonica gives you, then nobody has any reason to buy Ansonica. They'll just go to Vermentino. So my goal with this course is to say, hey, this is Vermentino, very popular wine. Everybody loves it, but this is an Ansonica. See how different they are and see maybe if you like this even more. And that's what we try to do. So we do that also for the general public, because wine lovers are very important. The wine lovers are the ones who then go out and buy wine. And so if I have a person who loves wine, who maybe has a wine club or maybe regularly sees friends who all enjoy wine. Those people go out, they have a bottle, they have two bottles. So those are exactly the people we want to reach out to and tell them, hey, this is a Brunello from the northern side of Montalcino. This is a Brunello from the southern side. See how different they are. And then this is one from southeast, and this is one from southwest, and they're even more different. So this is exactly what we want to do. We want to just create a very happy community of wine-loving individuals who are more comfortable and more knowledgeable about Italian wine. And if we can do that with the course, then mission accomplished.
And I just love the fact that this is for everybody, because I think so many people who love wine, they also want to have a little look behind the curtain. What does happen in the trade? How are we learning? And you have created a space where everybody can come. To eat with a whole load of different winemakers, to learn in the region in which some of that wine is coming from. I mean, for me, it's just so powerful. I'm just gutted I can't come. I can't come because I've just come back from holiday myself. But tell everybody listening the dates.
We'll invite you in November.
Yes, tell everybody the dates, because if anyone, there is still a few spaces left, isn't there? So when are the dates in April?
So they're going to be April 16 and 17. Those are the days of the courses. And 18, the morning, we do a quick multiple choice exam. In fact, most of the answers for that are given during the 2 days of tastings. So you can actually pass just by listening in the course and learning in the course. The goal is not to fail people. The goal is to have people enjoy wine and learn. And the multiple choice questions are just there to help people understand how much they have retained and how much they've learned and what they need to focus on. And then always on that last day, we also do 2 winery visits. So we have a lunch, and then we just grab the shuttle and go back to Florence. We meet people in Florence at the train station, the Santa Maria Novella train station. There we have a shuttle. We all go down together to Montalcino to the hotel, and that makes it very easy. And then on the last day, we all go back to Florence so people can fly out either from the Florence airport or take a train and go to Milan or Rome. Or they can even stay in Montalcino if they want to stay for a few more days. It's we've had people do that, and but the whole point is to make this, short and sweet, compact. People don't have to lose too much time from work. They have an intensive 2.5 days, which are a learning experience, but also a fun experience, and it's been working out very well. We're happy.
And actually, for those that are in the trade who are already in Italy because of the big trade Italian wine fair, Vinitaly, that finishes on the 15th, doesn't it? So the day before, you can finish the wine fair and then get a train across just a few hours to Florence, right?
Yeah, because Vinitaly actually finishes on the 15th this year of April, and we're going to meet in Florence later on that day around 5:30 and grab the shuttle and go down to Montalcino. So it's actually very, very easy for people who are already in Italy. They don't have to worry about getting a flight or anything, which is helpful if you're not, if you're living in Canada or the States or Asia. For people who live in Europe, it's so much easier because of our low-cost air travel now. When I used to live in London, when I used to live in Rome, I used to go to London all the time, and hopping on Ryanair and EasyJet is actually, well, it's always expensive, but it's very inexpensive compared to what it could be. And it's very comfortable and easy. So it's easy to do.
So I hope everybody listening is like, this is an awesome opportunity and an excuse for a holiday, everybody. I mean, we all need some sunshine. April will be lovely in Tuscany. So who does somebody email to find out more details and book in?
Giulia Corino. Giulia Corino is the CEO of our little company, and she's reachable at julia.corino@iandagotawine.com, and she'll give you all the information.
Fabulous.
And I hope people sign up, because my whole goal is to create a community of wine-loving individuals who are well-versed in Italian wines, who share the same passions, who have the same stories to tell and different stories to tell. And I think it's great. I love to meet people. I love to be with people who like wine. And so for me, it's a lot of fun too. It's, I have to teach the course, so it's less of a vacation for me, but in a way it's a vacation too. And I think it's just so great to meet people and be with people who like the same things. And it's just a lot of fun to be with the producers and great food and wine.
Oh, well, I've said this before. You're so giving and kind with your time. I can't imagine having a few days learning from you. Just having 45 minutes when we do these podcasts. Oh, I learn so much. So I think it's amazing. Everybody listening, go to my show notes. I will put links. I will put that email address there. And of course, if any doubts, everyone, you can always email me and I will send you the stuff. So Ian, as always, thank you so much. I'm sad to be missing this one, but thank you so much anyway for teaching us a little bit more about Brunello and Sangiovese.
Very happy. They're great wines, and it's a beautiful part of Italy. And like them, there's many, many others. Italian wine is complex, unfortunately, but it's fascinating. And it's usually made in very beautiful places by very beautiful people. So it's always fun.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Ian. And we'll speak soon.
Thank you, Janina.
Thank you. Bye.
Ciao.
Do take a look at the show notes where you're going to find all the detail about Ian's upcoming wine course this April. If you are someone who really wants to dive deeper into Italian wine, learning in the vineyards, the cellars, and the place where Brunello was actually made, this is an amazing opportunity. And in my opinion, learning from Ian is truly something special. He is not only one of the most knowledgeable people in the world when it comes to Italian wine, but also one of the most generous, engaging teachers, and frankly, one of the most wonderful humans in the wine world. So if you're tempted to join, head to those show notes. And of course, if you have any questions at all, you can always email me at janina@eatsleepwinerepeat.co.uk. All my contact details are in the show notes as well. And if you do go on the course, please come back and tell me how much you loved it. Now, next week, it seems I simply can't help myself. I'm really enjoying these Italian episodes, and I hope you are too, because we are heading to Sicily, the south of Sicily, in fact, where the island's only DOCG wine is made. Cereswollo di Vittoria. And in fact, a nice little segue from today's conversation, because Ian mentioned a grape variety that is in that blend, Nero d'Avola. So next week, we'll be learning more about Sicily's native grape varieties with one of the pioneers of organic winemaking on the island. That is Santa Teresa. But before we finish, as always, a quote to end the episode. This one is not actually about wine, but learning itself. And it was said by Mahatma Gandhi. Live as if you were to die tomorrow. Learn as if you were to live forever. And that is what I love about wine. It rewards curiosity. The more you learn, the richer every glass becomes. If you've enjoyed today's episode, it would mean the world if you could like, share, and leave a review for the podcast. It really does help more wine lovers discover the show. Because the more we learn about wine, the more there is to explore. Until next week, wine friends, cheers to you.